Well, hello, everybody, and thanks for joining us for session 2 of the Virtual Forest Policy Institute. We're going to give everybody a few minutes to get in out of the waiting room into the classroom. And while we're waiting, like we did yesterday, we love seeing your faces, seeing all the students, but also if everybody could just jump into the chat and say hi and where you're coming from as far as your school and what your major is. I'm seeing new faces and some faces from yesterday, so that's great. I'll start. I'm Melinda. I am with the Forest Landowners Foundation. I actually live in Florida. We were just talking about moving to Florida. I live in Virginia, right outside of Washington, D.C. I was an environmental sociology major, and I went to school here in Virginia at William & Mary. So if anyone wants to jump in on the chat, please add where you're connecting with us today and what your major is.
My name is Brandy Arundel, and I'm a forestry major. It is my junior year at SFA, and I'll be graduating in 2024.
Great. All right, I'm going to give it a few more seconds here. I see our guest speaker has arrived, so I will appreciate it. I know you're busy. You guys have had several hearings this week and maybe today as well, I think. So we'll get going. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. Again, thank you for joining us for the Virtual Forest Policy Institute. I'm just going to, for those of you who weren't with us yesterday, give you a little bit of background. I am with the Forest Landowners Foundation. We represent family forest landowners and private forest landowners throughout the country who by and large own their forest land for the purpose of growing timber. And many of them are families who are multi-generation. And so when we are talking about sustaining the forest and all the benefits that come from the forest that, there's a lot of focus on the forest right now. We talk about how can we sustain the family forest and the private forest landowner and make sure that they're economically viable through wood markets and other areas. Because if they're economically viable, then their forest will remain in forest use and we will be able to enjoy all the benefits. With that said, as you go through your coursework and your major and you focus on the ground forest management and ownership, I know you have full curricula and there's not time to discuss everything that's related to forestry, but by and large, no matter where you choose your career path or how your career path may choose you, as was the case for me, policies are going to enter into that, and they're going to impact whatever you do, whether it be clean water, habitat species, actual ownership, timber. And so we started realizing this a couple of years ago when we worked with deans of the forestry school, and we put together the Forest Policy Institute, where we bring students to Washington, D.C. for a full immersion for 3 days. They get to meet with members of Congress. They get to interact with our board of directors. With COVID and with some of the restrictions for the past 2 years, now third, we weren't able to do that. But we will be doing that again next year. So for anyone who's a junior or a potential grad student, keep that in mind and reach out to us. We get to bring 6 to 8 into DC, and it's a great experience. So what we're doing with the Virtual Policy Institute is we're really focusing on how policy in DC does trickle down to the management and ownership. Yesterday, we had somebody from the National Forest Owners Association who represents by and large corporate forest lands. Ethan gave a great presentation. So he talked about the importance of communication to the Hill and to congressional staffers. And he told his funny story, which I had never heard, about one staffer, and I know it's not Will, who's on the phone with us today, or the camera, who when you cut down the tree and you see steam coming out of that trunk, that's all the carbon going into the air and not the steam from the chainsaw. But it is critically important that we communicate with congressional staff. And so Will's going to tell us a little bit about how they receive that communication, but what it's like life on the Hill. And he has the unique pleasure. I showed a picture yesterday of Congressman Bruce Westerman from Arkansas. He's got the unique pleasure of working with the only forester and member of Congress with a forestry degree. I think it's even a master's degree from Yale. And also as the founder and co-chair of the Working Forest Caucus, which is basically a club organization among members of Congress who work and have interest within working forests. So with that, Will, I'll let you tell a little bit about yourself, and if you could start off with kind of how you came to where you are in your career path, and then jump right in. And when you're ready, we'll share the screen so you can do the presentation.
I appreciate it, Melinda, and thanks so much to you and Kate for organizing the Virtual Forest Policy Institute. Really looking forward to having people back here in person. The Capitol building is starting to reopen. It's really nice to actually have some forestry students up here on the Hill visiting with members of Congress and kind of seeing what the day-to-day operations like. Obviously this is a great opportunity to speak to a whole lot of people from across the country, but really looking forward to kind of giving sort of back into it. So I'll go ahead and share my screen here. I think I've just done it there, if everybody can see that. And then we'll put this into present mode and get on going. So just a really kind of top line overview about what I'm going to be talking about today. I'm going to be talking a little bit about kind of the current political climate, why y'all should care about what we talk about up here on the Hill, what do we talk about in Congress, how it's going to impact your lives and livelihoods with this, forest landowners, or, students of forest policy. We'll talk a little bit about the policy and the politics, the opportunities in the current Congress about what's coming down the pike the next couple of months in terms of forest policy, and then a little bit about what's going to be beyond this current Congress, which will end at the end of this year, what happens after the midterms, and how we still need to be focusing on expanding wood products markets, and then just like Melinda said, talking a little bit about how to communicate to the Hill, how to make sure that as you transition from being students to forest practitioners, how you can take your anecdotes, your experience, and then actually translate that into really advocacy up here on Capitol Hill, how you can make folks like my boss, again, as I'll go into here shortly, cares a lot about forest policy, cares a lot about what you guys do and how you all make your living, but basically how to actually educate folks that aren't as in tune with forest management, who don't understand what basal area means, and don't, frankly, kind of like Belinda just said, think that when you cut down a tree, you see steam, that's carbon escaping. So real quick, I don't want this to be just me talking at you all. Please feel free. I can't see the chat right now. Let's see if I can pull it up. I can see the chat while I'm going here. If you have questions, jump in. Feel free to unmute yourself and interrupt me. I apologize. That's the bell for voting. So you're going to hear some noises in the background. It's just a fun part of working at Capitol Hill. It's an interesting and fun environment, but we're looking forward to the presentation today. And basically interrupt me whenever you have a question, and I'll save some time at the end too. We can go a little bit further into it. So quick background on me. That's me, obviously there on the right-hand side. I'm a Clemson University graduate of 2015. Go Tigers. It was always a goal for me to work in DC. I interned up here my senior year. I caught the Hill bug. I graduated then shortly thereafter with a bachelor's in political science. I got to give a shout out. I wonder if are there any Clemson University students here on the call today? Clemson has been a super big supporter of Bruce over the years, and Pat Layden from the Clemson Wood Utilization Design Center has been super helpful when it comes to all things cross-laminated timber. So curious, are there any Tigers on here? I see an Auburn University. That's where my brother went. That's a different type of Tiger.
Yeah, I know we had several registers, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, well,
go Tigers, Brody.
Yeah, go Tigers. Yeah, there we are. Perfect. That's what I like to hear. In addition to that, I'm currently pursuing a master's degree at the moment and through the Naval War College. But a bit of a background on my career, started on the Hill actually with the Natural Resources Committee in 2016 after a brief stint in field operation. I started with the Resources Committee as just a staff assistant, someone answering the phones. I came up here again with a Bachelor of Science degree in poli-sci in hand. Not really a whole lot of connection to resources issues other than I'm outdoorsy. I, growing up, took full advantage of accessing our public lands and, basically camping in sort of well-maintained forests across the West. And so applied basically on that and learned very quickly there's a lot more to our public lands than just camping and recreating, hunting and fishing. And we really enjoyed learning a lot about like forest management, the energy, and then some of the other water issues that resources covers. So started as a staff assistant with a full committee, then went to work for then Chairman Tom McClintock from California with the subcommittee on federal lands. That's where I actually got my first real taste of some of the forest stuff that you guys working on recently at Federal Forest Act. From there, went to work for Bruce Westerman. Actually had never stepped foot in Arkansas till I applied for the job, and learned really quickly about the difference between a southern forest and a western managed one, and kind of the nuances between public and private managed forest was an interesting sort of tick there. I covered for him primarily the natural resources and agricultural portfolio, but then also and I'll kind of get into this a little bit later in terms of how personal office staff are a bit of an inch deep and a mile wide. Also covered things like telecom, tax, homeland security, a whole host of other issues. So as we talk a little bit more about how to communicate to the Hill bug staffers, we'll kind of emphasize the point of being concise on certain asks, because at any given time, a staffer could be juggling several things. So that's one quick thing there. In addition to that, helped Bruce and the rest of the team get ready for a steering campaign. You don't just become a ranking member or chairman of a particular committee here. You actually have to pitch your colleagues about why you should be in that leadership position. So I was a part of that team putting that pitch deck together. He was able to actually become ranking member of the Natural Resources Committee back in 2020, and I moved over with him to now work again for the Resources Committee as Deputy Staff Director of Outreach. So what does that mean? What do I do right now? My role is actually member services and coalitions. So I do a lot of communication. I make sure that all of the policy, all of the legislation and the bills that we work on a committee level are communicated to not just external stakeholders like K Street and downtown, all that sort of deal, but then also make sure that our committee dais, our members who are on our committee, and then the conference at large, all of the Republicans, are in lockstep of what Bruce likes to do in terms of his vision and that sort of deal. So basically, that means I communicate. I send out weekly update emails, convene different stakeholder groups, and participate in briefings and presentations similar to this one, talking a little bit about, again, Bruce's vision and the policy there. So that's me kind of in a nutshell. Again, before I move on, any questions about kind of what I did as an LA, what I did as a staff assistant, kind of on the way up there. Also, I'm seeing Angel said that he was experiencing some audio issues. Can someone just give me a thumbs up if they can hear me, just to make sure I'm all good?
Yeah, it's all good. I think there are some storms going through the southeast, so maybe that's part of the problem.
I understand that completely. Well, perfect. Moving on, that's enough about me. Talk a little bit about who Ranking Member Westerman is. So he's the guy on the right-hand side of that picture in the vest. As Melinda said, he's from Arkansas, Arkansas's 4th Congressional District. If you're familiar from Arkansas or from that state, it runs just a little bit south of Bentonville, all the way south to the Louisiana border, and then you essentially divide the state on a diagonal just a little bit south of Little Rock. So big towns include Hot Springs Village, where the boss is from, have a couple of public forests in that district with the Ouachita and the Ozark, with a lot of private land too. I know Weyerhaeuser is very big in the district, a lot of paper packaging products across that district. So he's an engineer by trade. His first job, or his main job prior to coming to Congress, was with Mid-South Engineering, traveled across the world actually designing sawmills. He is, as Melinda mentioned, Congress's only licensed forester. And he's a licensed professional engineer as well. He got his undergraduate at University of Arkansas, Woo-Pig. He was a walk-on actually with their football team. He got a ag engineering degree. And then he went to Yale for his master's in forestry. So it's funny, he makes a joke all the time about how his particular skill set isn't exactly suited to Congress. As an engineer, he's focused on solutions. And as a forestry major, he's thinking long-term. So trying to take a new approach when it comes to politics in that way. He was elected to Congress in 2015, wasn't ever intending to actually get into politics, was sort of drafted into it by essentially someone said, "Hey, Bruce, you should run for the school board." That turned into, "Hey, Bruce, you should run for the Arkansas State House." And that turned into, after Tom Cotton went to the Senate, hey, Bruce, you should consider running for Congress. So he's been a great boss to work for. He became, like I said, ranking member of the House Natural Resources Committee in 2020. And then he's the co-founder of the House Working Forest Caucus. Again, as Melinda mentioned, these caucuses are an additional opportunity to educate members and member staff on a variety of different issues. The House Working Forest Caucus, as the name might suggest, focuses on working forests and the value that, again, a proactively managed forest can bring to not just a rural economy, but then for, again, recreational access, healthy water, all that sort of good stuff. So I'll touch base on that a little bit later. Caucuses are an educational opportunity that in your advocacy, you should think about utilizing to educate members. They're a way that you can convene a bipartisan group of folks despite a very fractious environment currently, and talk about your issues. Again, bring a bipartisan group of members together on a particular set of issues, and try to advocate and push forward for policy, even in a divided climate. In addition to being part of the Working Forest Caucus, for example, Bruce is he's on the leadership team of both the House Western Caucus. So similarly, it's a group of members who comprise primarily Western states. They focus on rural issues. And then he's also on the leadership team of the Congressional Sportsmen's Caucus. So all the folks who like to recreate outdoors, hunt, fish, that sort of thing. Any quick questions about Ranking Member Western? Well, great. Seeing none, I'll keep on going. First question is, okay, well, what's a ranking member? What's a committee? I'll skip this slide if you all know generally about the legislative process, but I'm happy to kind of dive into that a little bit further here. I'll take a quick pause. Does everybody kind of know what a House committee does? I'm seeing some head nods. I'm seeing some, okay. I'll keep it short then. Long story short, we're that green circle on the graphic on the left-hand side. Bill gets introduced, it comes through committee in order to make it to the floor to then go and get a vote. It's primarily where a lot of the legislative work gets done. So let's say I see Brianna on my Brady Bunch squares. Brianna drops a bill. She says, I'd like to do something on forest policy. Great, it gets a referral to our committee, Natural Resources Committee. We'll have potentially an oversight hearing on it, figure out why she's introducing this bill. We'll have a legislative hearing. We'll actually examine the text of the bill, talk to industry experts like Forest Landowners Association and say, does this work? Does this make sense? Why are we doing this? Members of both sides will get an opportunity to ask questions, kind of drill down on the actual substance of the bill. From there, committee markup happens. That's literally where we mark the bill up. We'll go and change things, offer amendments, argue about stuff. And then, in theory, it passes through a markup, goes to the floor, we start the process all over again, except for instead of having just 40 members with a committee, you have the whole House. And that's every member, all Republicans and Democrats. From there, passes the House, Senate does it all over again. We make sure the two versions match, then we go to the president, then it becomes a law. So that's in short what a committee will do. On staff, we employ essentially issue experts here. So we have a National Park Service guy, we have a water person, we have a water gal, et cetera. It's our job to help both inform personal office, so the individual member of Congress, their staff and their members about issue specific stuff. So again, their expertise is to help draft and inform members as they're interpreting things and dealing with issues of the day. So our committee jurisdiction is pretty broad. All of them are, but what you guys probably care about is the Resources Committee. It handles all the forest reserves and national parks that are created from the public domain. So that's U.S. Forest Service, that's National Park Service, Bureau of Land Management, all that sort of stuff. But it goes beyond that too. I mean, we deal with irrigation and water reclamation. We deal with mining interests nationally, anything that's subsurface mineral rights. Oil and gas, onshore and offshore energy production. We deal with all tribal issues that are facing the country, and then also things like Puerto Rico and the Trans-Alaska oil pipeline. All that sort of stuff is in our committee's jurisdiction. We've got 5 subcommittees. Energy and mineral resources is pretty straightforward. That's the gas stuff. That's oil and natural gas on public lands. That's critical minerals, domestic mining. National parks, forests, public lands. Again, similarly, those are our forests, our national parks, Bureau of Land Management. Water, oceans, and wildlife, Fish and Wildlife Service, the wet side of NOAA, so the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, critters, Endangered Species Act, that sort of stuff. And then Indigenous peoples, again, tribal stuff. We also have an oversight subcommittee as well. So I'll take another brief pause here. I just threw a lot of information at you about what the heck the Resources Committee is, what we do, why we do it. Does anyone have questions there? And don't be shy. I'm happy to take a pause here and listen to folks here.
Yeah, well, I think yesterday we just had all the questions at the end, so maybe they're
Okay.
holding off till the end.
That's all right, and I'll save some time and we'll touch base at the end. So moving on a little bit then, talk a little bit about kind of the current political climate. So right now, our current Congress, it's one of the most politically divided times in our country's history. If you take a look at this Pew ideological survey, it's a few years old, but still very relevant. More Democrats and more Republicans are more and more likely to be either consistently voting with their party than ever before. There's not as much cross-party voting anymore. Unfortunately, things like COVID, the two recent administrations, other incidents here on Capitol Hill have sort of exacerbated this, where we're at a very divided part of our nation's history. It's challenging to advocate and pass complete bipartisan legislation in this day and age. So that's what's going on. How do you address that? How do you cut through that? As a forest policy student, and then eventually as a landowner or someone actually participating in that workforce, how do you talk to the Hill and how do you talk to the government and make sure that you can continue to cut through this? We'll touch a little bit more about this at the end for me, but it's first and foremost, the thing that I'd like to drive home here the most today, it's going to be coalitions and collaboration. So collaborate. Work with, as you're again communicating to the Hill, as you're talking to, again, folks that may not understand forest policy generally, or may not understand, like I said in the beginning, what basal area is. Make sure that you are not just providing anecdotes from your experience, but working with both forestry and non-traditional forestry stakeholders to highlight how the issue you're trying to address impacts a whole wide variety of different individuals. I think a really great way, and I think Melinda, correct me if I'm wrong, have you guys already heard from NAFO, or is NAFO tomorrow?
Ethan spoke yesterday about their carbon biz. So yes, we've heard from NAFO.
Perfect. Yeah, so NAFO is a very great example. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about this, of how they've been able to collaborate with folks across the political spectrum, from groups like the Environmental Defense Fund to groups like the ag folks, all with the goal of trying to actually push forward proactive change in private land management. So they're a great example about, if you want to get something done, if you want to, again, cut through this dissonance, work with both your traditional forest stakeholders, folks like FLA, but then also folks that may not have just forest land in their portfolio. They may be like a paper and packaging company. They may be a water utilizer, folks who irrigate based off of water that's filtered through a forest. Taking this multifaceted approach helps make sure that regardless of where you're on the political spectrum, that individual, that member of Congress staff has some buy-in, has some reason to listen to you, and has, again, reason to care. And it helps, again, educate folks, even though that right now parties aren't talking as much as they used to be. So ways that we're going to try and take advantage of that here and sort of put that into practice in the 117th Congress. Start with bipartisanship. The Trillion Trees Act is Ranking Member Westerman's one of his signature pieces of legislation. You may have heard about it. If not, the Trillion Trees Act, it's essentially trying to reduce our overall the overall level of atmospheric carbon by proactively just planting trees internationally, but then also creating a sustainable product cycle where we're managing these trees effectively to continually sequester carbon. And then at the end of a tree's lifespan, turning that into a healthy forest product, a long-lived forest product, things like a cross-laminated timber or something along those lines. Again, so we're trying to not just plant trees, we're trying to manage trees so they don't turn into catastrophic wildfire and emit loads of carbon. And then we're trying to utilize trees sustainably at the end of its cycle to then take some of that embodied carbon, turn it into something that's going to live for a little bit longer, and then make space for replanting trees. Coming at it from a different angle is the Save Our Sequoias Act. As you see in the picture on the right-hand side, unfortunately, the US is, obviously everybody knows what giant sequoia is. It's one of the most iconic pieces. I mean, it's on the National Park Service's logo. It's one of the most iconic parts of our country. These trees are only found in very specific parts of the world, especially in California. Unfortunately, due to our current fire scenario, we've seen almost a 20% loss in all of these timber stands over the past 2 years. It's been a tragic few years, actually, and that picture is from, I believe, a giant sequoia national park of these trees being susceptible to catastrophic wildfire. Taking what I spoke about a little bit earlier and putting it to use is we are working currently with Representative Peters and others from California trying to protect these trees through something called the Save Our Sequoias Act. The legislation is a broad, it's taking what we normally fight on with Republicans, Democrats, broad-based forest management opportunity and bringing it down to, again, the small stand base approach. Taking, again, a collaborative approach to addressing these challenging issues. And I'm sorry, I'm actually having connectivity issues. I apologize. Anyway, Save Our Sequoias Act. So what we're trying to do is collaborate with Representative Peters, someone who's really been someone who's fought us on kind of broad-based forest management in the past, and then approaching it from a different angle, saying, hey, look, we'd like to apply this forest management policy, something that we've tried to implement on a large scale before through things like the Resilient Federal Forest Act, and bringing it back down to something he cares about, protecting these giant sequoias. So that's what I'm going back about in terms of collaborating, taking a different approach, not just going from a traditional forest policy standpoint where we're saying, listen, we need to just completely manage these trees, clear cut in certain areas, but actually saying proactively, this is following the best science. We can protect these iconic tree species. And then in that process, educate folks who may be opposed to mechanical thinning, who may be opposed to other different types of forest management, and saying, look, this is a proactive approach. This is something that you can do to actually protect these tree species. And oh, by the way, if you apply this at a larger scale, we can actually help reduce the overall amount of wildfire. We can actually increase, we can help improve forest products markets globally. We can help put people back to work in the rural economy. So that's what I mean about being collaborative when you approach different things. Additional educational opportunities here in the 117th Congress, that goes back to that Working Forest Caucus thing. We're going to take a group of bipartisan members actually out to go see these sequoia stands to help illustrate some of that stuff. There's a lot of opportunity that, there may not be a whole ton of legislative opportunity for, again, for folks in the minority here like the Republicans are, but that's okay. We're going to still use these different issues to educate on our issues. And for you all, there's opportunities to participate in that process. As folks like the Working Forest Caucus are putting on briefings, making sure that your voices are heard there is going to be super important. As we, again, continue to debate these issues, wildfire and other things in congressional hearings, there's opportunities to for FLA, for other folks like that, to submit stuff for the record and, again, have your voices heard, provide those anecdotes that can help drive policymaking. And then finally, Omnibus end of the year package, what does that mean? Omnibus is it is omnibus appropriation package. Essentially, it's how we fund the government in this day and age. Frequently, there are different bits and pieces tacked onto those bills, for really large pieces of legislation. And then end of the year packages are things that, as the name states, sort of at the end of the year, we take a look at all the outstanding legislation, things that we'd like to get passed. We cram it all into one bill and we pass it. I bring that up in kind of a flip sense because, again, going back to that politically divided chart, it's pretty difficult to pass just forest management legislation on its whole. I mean, it's pretty divisive. A standalone bill hasn't passed on forest management in particular in several Congresses now. And so the way that we try and address these ongoing issues, make sure that the Forest Service has the tools they need, make sure that we're supporting a healthy forest economy, is by taking bits and pieces of those major packages and then putting them on, again, end of the year bills, omnibus appropriations. And there are some opportunities that are coming down the pipeline here on the 117th Congress that we're looking to target. An end of the year lands package and recreation package is one of those things. I'm sure if you guys follow the news, the reconciliation bill is still ongoing. There may be an opportunity there. There's a couple of different ways that we're hoping to crack that nut. Moving on beyond the 117th is the midterm elections. So taking a look at the right-hand side, that's a chart from 538. Basically, on average, the party in the majority, currently the Democrat Party, loses on average 17 to 20 seats when their president is facing a midterm election. So what we're expecting and what the Republicans are hoping for, at least in this next year, is that the House will flip at the end of this year and the Republicans will still be back in charge. So why is that an opportunity? Well, as I sort of illustrated with the Save Our Seedlings Act, some of our Democrat colleagues don't necessarily support all of the forest management stuff that the ranking member is trying to accomplish. So obviously, in addition to that too, because we're in the minority, ranking member Westerman cannot set the hearing agenda. We can't talk about the issues we'd like to talk about in the way we'd like to talk about them. We have to be reactionary to how the majority is currently setting the congressional calendar. All that changes if, again, Republicans are in charge. We move from being ranking member Westerman to Chairman Westerman. We get to set the agenda. We get to talk about the issues we want to talk about in the ways we want to talk about. However, that doesn't change who's in the White House. And that also certainly doesn't change that you still need 60 votes to pass the Senate. So bipartisan is still required. Even if the House flips here in 2020, that still means that we have to approach forest management. It still means we have to approach improving, forest markets in a way that's going to pass both the muster and the Senate, and then get to the president's desk. Another huge opportunity that's going to be coming down beyond this Congress is going to be the Farm Bill. Far as many of you, I'm sure, know, the Farm Bill is a major piece of legislation that covers a variety of different things. But for the forest landowner side of the world, the forestry title, the Healthy Forest Restoration Project, CRP, all that sort of stuff is taken care of in that legislation, and it comes up every 5 years. And not this year, not 2022, but in 2023, we will actually be in an on-cycle year for the Farm Bill, where the committees of jurisdiction, ag, us, and others will actually sit down and start creating that bill, and that's another opportunity that we're looking towards. Again, advancing some sound forest management policy. So, kind of putting this all on a bow, the two things I'd like to leave you with is, again, how do you, in this crazy climate, how do you make your voices heard? And then two, how, as you're communicating to member offices and committee offices, how can you be most effective? So first and foremost, it's the collaborative coalition building. It's making sure that when you approach advocacy, when you're talking to congressional offices, that yes, provide the anecdotes, provide the stories of the on-the-ground experience and how it's impacting your life. I think that one of the more important things for my boss is hearing specifically from his constituents about what the decisions we're making up here, how it's impacting someone's bottom line. That's a really important piece there, and I don't want to kind of gloss over that. But in addition to that, think about not just how your bottom line is being affected, but again, from that wide angle perspective of, okay, I know forests are an integral part of the rural economy. I know that there's a truck that drives, like there's truckers that drive the log trucks. There's engineers that work in sawmills. How are policy decisions, the things that I'm trying to change, impacted, or how are people's lives impacted by those particular policy points, and be broad with how you're approaching it. Again, I'm going back to the example of National Association of Forest Owners. They're currently working on addressing forest policy and private land forest management in a really great way. They're bringing in folks from across the spectrum, from kind of traditional environmental groups to ag groups to water groups, and saying, listen, we all are invested in a healthy forest economy. We should approach this in a bipartisan manner, and that's something that I would encourage you all to think about. Not just how our policy is impacting your lives, but then what's the additional gear there? Where else are other people impacted? How can you then use their stories to supplement your own? And then additionally, communicating with member offices. So as I sort of indicated when I was working over up at working for Bruce's personal office, a lot of the personal office staff are an inch deep and mile wide. And also too, not a whole lot of them work for a professional forester or get an opportunity to speak to folks like you all who have such a wide range of expertise and knowledge in a particular industry. So the two things I would recommend is just be concise, be quick. Talk about hey, this is why this is how this is impacting me. This is why you should care about it. Don't have to get over jargony, but be a source of information. If a staff member asks you about the difference between a southern why does the southern yellow pine forest have to be different than a different timber stand out in Oregon? Just dumb it down to them. Explain to them like a 5-year-old, or him or her like a 5-year-old, and that'll help a lot. But other than that, that sort of wraps it up. Again, the two things I'd like to leave you with, and I appreciate the time here today. This has been a really awesome opportunity, is collaborate here. As you're communicating to the Hill, think about just the other organizations, the other groups that you can partner with to help tell your message. And then again, inch deep and a mile wide. So don't hesitate to dumb it down and make it short and sweet for us. But I'll go ahead and quit sharing my screen here, and then happy to answer any questions you all have and talk a little bit. I'm happy to talk about anything from what we're looking at here in the next week to the next month and year, or how I ended up in my current role, or any questions you guys have.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for the presentation and taking the time to talk to us today. And of course, thank your boss for us for everything that he does for the forest industry. So I just wanted to take a second here at the beginning before we hop into the Q&A portion to kind of go through a run of the show, how we're going to do this. So first, hey, everybody. If you were on yesterday, hello again. If it's your first session, hi, my name is Katie Moss. I am the going by my old title, I'm the Government Affairs Coordinator for the Forest Landowners Association. It's really great to have all of you. I apologize in advance. I'm on my phone right now. I'm in Mississippi and the weather is not cooperating. Y'all in the Southeast understand we're in tornado season and all of that. So yeah, I'm coming to you from my phone, but great to see everybody, see some familiar faces from last time and some new faces. So yeah, so the Q&A section. So how we're going to do this is if you have a question, use the raise hand function and I will call on you, ask you to unmute for your question. We can also use the chat, but we'll probably go to the hands first. So yeah, just if anybody has any questions, I will turn it over to you guys. Also have some questions teed up, so.
Yeah, and if we can ask everybody to turn their cameras back on, it really helps for the interaction. We'd love to see all of your faces, and no matter where you are or what state your hair might be in this afternoon, that's fine with us. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm not seeing any hands yet. So I'll kick off the Q&A session. So I guess my first question is, you spent the last little bit talking about communications and the importance of communications. So as some of these students may be looking to pursue careers on the Hill or internships on the Hill, or enter into the forest industry and be communicating with the Hill. My first question is, how from the congressional side of things have you seen that communication has sort of changed since COVID, and what are some of the pros and cons of that?
It's a really good question, Katie. COVID has obviously impacted everybody's lives, and unfortunately, it has limited our opportunities to meet with folks in person. Obviously, I'm looking at you guys all through a Zoom screen. So I'll start with the good news. The good news is that gives us, and the opportunity, and when I say us, I mean congressional staff, the opportunity to meet with folks across the country pretty much at the drop of the hat. There's an opportunity to convene a whole group of people on a Zoom square and give different angles. So again, to that kind of collaborative coalitions thing, you can put together a group of folks on a Zoom call and approach an issue from a wide range, because you can grab different people at different times. Unfortunately, you do lose that in-person interaction. To be honest with you, I'm looking at probably half dozen faces right now, I appreciate the people who are on there, but it's harder for me to connect with the folks who don't have the cameras on. And as I'm sure you guys know, that the difference, for most of you guys who probably started university or your classes in person and then had to transition back and forth between Zoom and on here, it just makes it more difficult. So answer your question, there's good news about the kind of the virtual environment. You can grab more people, you can offer a wider range of things. Staff and members are just more accessible, frankly, because you don't have to just get in with somebody. But it also means that it's a little bit harder to kind of get that in-person feel. It's harder to deliver a really, punchy message where it's saying, hey, that your policy is hurting my bottom line over a Zoom square, and just to be aware of that. I also put in a thing too that Zooms can be fatiguing, as I'm sure you guys know, that if you do 6 or 8 hours worth of Zoom classes, you're kind of burned out at the end of that too. Just be cognizant of that. I think as approaching the conversation, that we've all gone through this together, and it's impacting how everybody's doing their day-to-day lives. But also don't be hesitant to pick up the start that interaction and start that Zoom. But fingers crossed, we are hopefully transitioning back to a more in-person thing. And as you all are pursuing internships up here on the Hill, it'll vary from office to office. There are a lot of folks that are coming back in full time now, and that'll give you an opportunity to hopefully walk these halls in person.
I see Gregory has his hand raised if you want to ask your question.
Thanks. Hey, thanks for your time, Will. I admittedly watch a fair amount of C-SPAN, but I was wondering, so I can keep it on my calendar, if you know of any upcoming committee hearings on the potential impacts of upland forest development on downstream water quality.
That's a really great question, Gregory. And while I don't have any of those in my committee coming up in the next month or so, I'll be sure to, I'm happy to provide that to Katie or Melinda to make sure that you guys get that. I'm putting my partisan hat on, as a staffer for Ranking Member Westerman, I'd be remiss to say that the current majority has neglected to focus on forest management in general here. And there are unfortunately impacts on water quality because of that. I think that if we were to retake the majority, would definitely want to focus on forest management in general. Most of our nation's water comes from our public forest land. And as we see more and more catastrophic wildfires, we're having, as I'm sure you know, adverse impacts to our water quality. So the long answer is, if there is one, I'll let you know. I wouldn't count on it, unfortunately.
Hey, Will, can you type in the link to your email newsletter? Will puts out a great newsletter. And so you can receive that, and he'll let you know through the newsletter when those hearings. So I don't know if you can type in the chat or you can go to the full committee website to get their newsletters and updates as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So the newsletter I sent out is I'm blended to you is it's intended for K Street folks, but please feel free to forward that to folks.
Okay.
I hope and encourage anybody to just control F that to whomever. However, if you go on our committee's website, which my comms team would kill me for not having this already pulled up, you can sign up for Mr. Westerman's normal committee communications. That'll give you updates on all of the hearings and things like that, so you can actually tune in, like Brandon, you were asking when we have hearings and that sort of thing. So I'll while I'm waiting for the next question, I'll go and grab our committee's webpage and drop that link in the chat.
So I have a comment, not so much a question as people are waiting, but yesterday I gave some stats. Well, two things I want to hit on. One is how many bills were introduced in the past two Congresses with the word forest. So there was something like 1,200. Of those, 44 have really became law. And Will touched on the omnibus, and that was a really good point that I did not hit on yesterday. So in like the infrastructure bill that was passed this year, there were several forestry bills that got rolled up into that. And so that is becoming more the norm. As he said, standalones don't happen, but you are seeing, I used to work on Capitol Hill as well, right out of college. I had no business working on Capitol Hill, had no background whatsoever, but there I was. And so the importance of communications from people who really knew about the issues was very important. I'll say that. Yeah. But what you see is, while maybe standalone bills aren't getting passed, what I have noticed, and even from my time at the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation to now in the forestry, is that collaboration. So while we as a forest landowners represent forestry and really the forest landowner, will hit on that collaboration with the environmentalist. And so I think as maybe Congress and members of Congress and the parties have come further apart, the activists, I'll use that term, have come closer together. And so that's really important. And you never know where you're going to end up in your career. My first, I was going to work for the US PIRG, which is a polling interest research group, doing door-to-door canvassing for the environment. I have no idea. I just needed a job. So you just never know where you're going to end up. So just a little bit on coalitions and bills being passed.
Yeah, absolutely. And to add that point, yes, Congress has gotten a little bit more polarized, but we are having a great time actually working with some of the center environmental groups on the Save Our Sequoias Act, Environmental Defense Fund. The Nature Conservancy does a ton of actual forest management work. So there are groups that understand these things. And when I'm talking about collaborating, it's taking, like Melinda, you worked with CSF, Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation. It's taking that hook and bullet perspective, the folks who recreate outdoors. It's taking the environmental perspective. It's taking the landowner's perspective, putting it all into a blender, and then providing a cohesive message. I think Sabine has her hand up.
Hi, thank you, Will, so much for taking the time to present for us. I have two questions. Actually, now that you're just talking about sort of private actors having an influence in coalition building and bills being passed, I'm wondering, in your time at the Hill, do you think that's influenced any of the polarization? Has it helped with bipartisanship, or is that not really part of that?
So let me make sure I understand your question correctly. You're saying that I have external organizations. Oh, can you hear me now?
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
So I want to make sure I understand your question. Have external organizations helped or hurt the polarization?
Yeah, correct.
It's a good question. I think it's a tough question to answer, frankly. Mm-hmm. I think that, again, from a strict political science standpoint, there's a lot of reasons why our Congress and the nature of our politics is more and more polarized. I'm sure that we could have another hour-long discussion on why that is and why we're currently facing that environment. And I will say that there are certainly certain organizations on both sides that have taken advantage of that situation and have improved their standing based on like essentially putting their thumb on the scale on either side. But the flip side of that, there's also been a ton of groups that have have tried to act as counterweights. And that's ultimately what I'm trying to encourage here is sustainable policy and long-term policy requires just a multilateral and wide levels of buy-in. If you want to see something that lasts one particular Congress or one particular administration cycle, turnover, it has to be something that is generally agreed upon by both sides. And so hence why, as you guys are thinking about advocating, making sure that you're getting as much buy-in as you can, that helps ensure that your change not only gets through, but sticks around.
Great, thank you.
You said you had 2 questions.
Oh, right. My second one, I mean, I think you touched upon it just now. I was going to say, as someone who might be interested in maybe going to the Hill eventually, like what are some, if you could give like top 3 pieces of advice when working there? Seems like a pretty intimidating place if you don't know well and stuff like that.
Well, my first foremost piece of advice is don't be intimidated. There's nothing super special about the Hill other than there's people who want to help, who want to come here and help serve their country and improve a particular set of policy. Best piece of advice is make sure you can write well. You're comfortable, like taking a very broad piece of policy and distilling it down quickly. That's pretty much the bread and butter of your job, as I'm sure both Melinda and Katie can kind of attest. And then, just to be ambitious. If you have one of the most important things or one of the most unique things, which is a .edu email. If I get a .edu email, I know that you're a student. I'm definitely going to listen. At some point in time in my life, I asked somebody else for an informational interview. They connected me with the resources job, and that's how I got my first job. And so that is a universal story here on Capitol Hill. So take a look at not just if you care about a particular issue area, care about forest policy. If you yourself care about, I don't know, name something else, oil and gas policy
for me.
Exactly. Go and seek out not just the members of Congress, but their staff that are the best in your mind, and their emails are available online. My email is my first name my last name @mail.house.gov. Cold email them, follow up, say, hey, I'm Sabine. I'm a student at. I'm sorry, I don't know where you go to school.
No worries, Auburn. No worries. Thank you.
Yeah, and just say, hey, can I get 15 minutes of your time to pick your brain? And if you get 1 yes out of 5 emails, that's success, and that can help propel you into working in this industry if you'd like to.
Great, thank you so much.
And sort of building off of that question, especially when it House Natural Resource Committee, Senate Ag, committees like that, do you see a big benefit in having interns and congressional staff that have a forestry or natural resources background?
110%. So I don't think I have worked with a resources committee that we haven't had a Demers scholar on staff. It's just a really valuable asset. Like as I mentioned, I have a political science background. The only reason why I know like a micron of information about forestry stuff is because I work for Bruce Westerman. As we're developing this policy, it is really important that not only that we have people on our teams that can understand this stuff. They understand the not just the first order effect, but the second and third order effect of, one of the things that I gripe about the most is the diameter limit in California, because it's literally high grading the forest in California, which, as I'm sure you guys know, isn't great depending on where you are. If more people knew that and understood why that was bad from a policy perspective, our forest policy would be so much better in this country, I think.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. Some stats I gave yesterday as well was of the nearly 10,000 staffers, congressional staffers, less than 20 had forestry degrees. I think when I checked in Legistorm a couple of years ago, natural resource degrees probably have increased a little bit more. So with the forest landowners, what we're looking to do next summer when we come out of COVID is work with members or the ranking and the chairman members of these committees to go ahead and secure internships for forestry students, for students who have this knowledge, so we can guarantee or at least help get you into Capitol Hill, because it is hard. And Will was direct on. I have several stories that I'm aware of where informational interviews 4 or 5, 6 months later actually led to jobs. Call on anybody you know, your professors, ask them to make that introduction and ask for that friendly interview, because just once you get to know someone, and Capitol Hill needs forestry minded people with so much going on right now. So you do have a leg up in a way, in that there are so few there at the moment. So if you're interested in such an internship next year, don't forget, check back with Forest Landowners Foundation. We'll have a whole page on that, and you'll be able to see how to apply.
Yeah, and Melinda, you have my email. Please let me know when you guys get that started. I know that Bruce Westerman in his personal office facilitates a similar program with engineering students, and that's again, we do need those perspectives to add on to what Melinda was saying. But just a personal offer here too to everybody. Again, my email is my first name, will.layden@mail.house.gov. If you're ever curious, you want 15 minutes of time and want to talk about a little bit more about how to get a job up here, if you like what it's like to be a staffer, shoot me an email. Happy to find some time for you. And Melinda, if other folks are looking to connect, please feel free to share my contact information. Melinda and Katie, sorry.
All right, so we're coming up on 5 o'clock. We'll give anybody a chance if you've been holding back and want to ask one more question. All right. If not, Will, we really appreciate your time. We know how hard you work. You'll probably be at work till what time will you go home tonight?
Early enough for dinner. We'll see.
Okay. Well, that's good. That's good. So
I usually eat around 8 or 9 o'clock. So
yeah. You start early and you go to bed late. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Tomorrow. Oh, go ahead, Will.
Oh, I was going to say thank you so much. I'm sorry to cut you off. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you guys today, and then I can't say thank you enough for what Forest Landowners does for advocating for forest policy here on Capitol Hill. We really appreciate your expertise.
Yeah, and right back at you and Congressman Westerman. So tomorrow, please join us for the third and final in the series. We're going to have Chris Wonston from USDA, who is their climate specialist, and so you'll get to hear from the federal agency perspective, and that'll round out all 3 of our speakers. So we hope you enjoyed today. Will, thank you so much for your perspectives and all your time. And everybody else, have a great day. Stay safe.
Yeah, thanks. Same to you guys.
Thanks, everybody.